Welcome back to our series of lessons on verbal communication in intercultural settings. This lesson is brought to you by the University of Languages and International Studies. I hope that you will enjoy it. For today's lesson, we will answer the question, why verbal communication is complicated in intercultural settings. Firstly, let's figure out the relationship between language and culture based on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lees-Whorf were the two leading scientists in linguistics, and their hypothesis on this field has made a great influence on the perception of linguistic scholars. Sapir and Whorf claimed that a cultural system is embodied in the language of the people who speak the language. This cultural framework shapes the thoughts of the language speakers. We think in the words and the meanings of our language, which in turn is an expression of our culture. To be the best illustration, let's take the Chinese language into consideration. In the Chinese language, there are no single word that is equivalent to the English words uncles and aunt. Instead, Chinese has different words for one father's elder brother, younger brother, mother elder brother, and younger brother. Even different words for elder or younger brothers-in-laws, and so forth. This diversity of terms may suggest that the interpersonal relationships involved between an individual and his or her extended family are more complex and perhaps more important in China than in English-speaking countries. Another example, the term "a cruel male-dominated culture" implies different things in different cultures. As you might see on the slide now, a Western woman looks at a woman covers all her body but her eyes. She thinks the man in this country is too cruelly dominant, but that might be surprising perception of a cruel male-dominated culture of the other one. In short, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis wants to address the close connection among language and culture. Language, as a part of culture, affects how we perceive the world and just influences the meanings that are conveyed by words. Verbal communication, in this case, acts as a means of negotiating meanings among different cultures. So now I think you have a pretty much idea on the relations of language, verbal communication, and culture. So can you answer the question, why verbal communication is complicated in intercultural settings? You might have your own answers now, but my suggestion is that, as far as you know, each country or territory has its own language and culture. Thereby, people hold different perception on life. When they communicate, those two worlds clash. But it is really hard for the communicators to fully understand the cultural values of the others. So the misunderstanding often happens and might accidentally involve others. For example, in intercultural communication, people often mistake the force of a statement for what it actually looks like. Many newcomers to the United States get frustrated when people ask, "How's it going?" when they do not really want to know, while "how it's going" can be a heartfelt request information in the US. It usually serves as a greeting, and the speakers do not expect a response. In cultures that prefer indirectness, like Japan, a statement in a negotiation section like "we'll think about it" sounds like a promise for future consideration, but may be a polite way to say no. So what are the variations in communication style? Because, as far as you know, successful communication not only depends on what is said, but also on how the message is communicated. Communication style refers to how language is used to communicate meaning. Two leading researchers from communication studies, William Kudis-Kunt and Stella Kim-Toomey, describe the 4 communication styles identified by communication theorists: direct or indirect, elaborate or succinct, personal or contextual, and instrumental or affective. Recognizing the differences in communication styles can help us to understand the cultural differences underpinning the verbal communication process. The first dimension is direct or indirect communication style. A direct communication style is one in which the speaker's need, wants, desires, and intentions are explicitly communicated. Conversely, an indirect communication style is one in which the speaker's true intentions or needs are only implied or hinted at during the conversation. Although both styles are to some extent universally used in communication, research indicates that indirect styles are more likely to be used in collectivist or Asian cultures, such as in Japan, China, South Korea, and Hong Kong, whereas harmony is considered important for maintaining good interpersonal relationships. Indirect communication styles are also more likely to be used in high-context cultures, where meaning is communicated through context rather than explicitly conveyed in words. By comparison, Western cultures generally prefer a direct communication style. The second dimension is elaborate or succinct style, which is concerned with the quantity of talk a culture's values, and reflects a culture's attitude toward talk and silence. The elaborate style involves the use of rich, expressive, and embellished language in everyday conversation. For example, rather than simply saying that someone is thin, a comment such as, "She's so thin that she can walk between raindrops without getting wet," embellish and colors the statement. Arab, Middle Eastern, and African American cultures tend to use metaphorical expressions in everyday conversation. In a succinct communication style, simple assertions and even silence are valued. The use of either an elaborate or a succinct style is closely related to whole, high and low context cultures. Elaborate style tends to characterize low context cultures, in which meaning is conveyed through verbal codes. Conversely, in high context cultures, where meaning is more often conveyed by nonverbals and contextual cues, silence rather than talk can be used to maintain control in a social situation. For example, in Europe, the Finns place a high value on silence, and it is not unusual to pass a companionable evenings in Helsinki with virtually no words exchanged at all. The third dimension is concerned with the extent to which the speaker emphasizes the self as opposed to his or her role. Kudis-Kunt and Kim-Toomey define personal style as one that amplifies the individual's identity of the speaker. This style is often used in individualistic cultures, which emphasize individual goals over those of the group. Person-centered communication tends to be informal and is reflected by the use of pronouns I. On the other hand, contextual communication style is oriented by status and role. Formality and power distance are often emphasized. Contextual style is often seen in collectivistic cultures where one's role, identity, and status are highlighted. For example, instead of using you for all persons, as is in the case in English. In Japanese language, there exists an elaborate system of linguistic forms used to communicate respect to people of different ranks or social status. And the last dimension is instrumental or affective communication style. Instrumental style is goal-oriented and sender-focused. The speaker used the communication to achieve an outcome. Affective communication style is receiver-focused and process-oriented. Speakers using affective communications are more concerned with the process of communication than the outcome. For example, in an organization where the boss explicitly tells a subordinate what to do and why, communication is instrumental. Instrumental and affective communication style can also be related to individualism and collectivism and high and low context cultural dimensions. In collectivistic cultures, people are more conscious of the other person's reaction and attempt to sense a meaning by situational cues, so thus an affective style tends to be preferred. An instrumental style, on the other hand, is often seen in business and other professional contexts, particularly in Western cultures, where verbal explicitness is valued. Now please look further to the 4 areas in which we could see a huge impact of cultures on how we accomplish many different communication acts. Those 4 areas are directive, criticism, apology, and compliment. For the first area, directive refers to the attempt to influence the behaviors or persuade others. These range from subtle hints to obvious command. People in Colombia might use a go-between or intermediary to persuade someone across status lines. People in Colorado, USA, tend to use politeness behaviors, giving the target of the persuasion away to avoid the imposition. Someone might say, "Hey, if you're not busy, would you be able to give me a ride?" So that the other person could reply that she or he is busy. Similarly, the professors Min Kun Kim and Stephen Wilson found that US Americans and South Koreans both felt that direct requests were the clearest way to get someone to do something, but that the US Americans felt such a form to be the most effective, and the South Koreans think it is the least effective. The second area is criticism. In a study of people's perception on criticism, Taiwanese and US American participants gave the most likely responses to situations that might yield a complaint or criticism, such as being late for an appointment, invasions of privacy by a parent, or server's mistakes at a restaurant. However, findings from conversational data suggest that some cultures prefer to soften criticism or not offer it, but for different reasons. Japanese people might avoid criticism and strong emotional display in many cases because it shows lack of omoiyari, the ability to sense the pain or pleasures of another. The Japanese often do not want the other person to feel bad. In contrast, the Americans tend to choose a direct criticism. The next area is apology. In response to an embarrassing situation, should someone make a joke, give an explanation or defense, or make an apology of some sort? The professors Imatori and William Copwedge had participants describe an embarrassing predicament of their choice. The Japanese students were more likely to describe something that had happened with someone from their in-group, and the US American, someone from an out-group. The Japanese were more likely to feel a sense of shame in the sense of negative reflection upon their group for the embarrassing situation, but the Americans, it is guilt or a sense of personal responsibility. Why people in both cultures preferred to avoid mentioning the wrong and an apologies as the primary responses. In some situations, Americans were much more likely to use humor to lighten the situation, while Japanese was not. And the last one is compliment. The ways of giving command is pretty much the same across cultures. However, the ways of responding to those compliments vary. For example, you received the first prize in a competition. In American cultures, people might say, "Thank you," but in Vietnamese culture, people will find ways to deny the compliments from others. They might say, "It's nothing, I need to try more." Yes, so that's all of our lesson today. I hope that you now understand the complications of verbal communications in intercultural context. Thanks for your attention.